Hi there, everybody, and welcome to our fantastic International Women's Day panel. This year's theme is being inspiring inclusion. At New Writing South and at Writing Around the Kids, we are committed to supporting women writers to do this through our workshops, our panels, and our podcasts. And we are beyond excited to introduce today our amazing panelists.
So first up, I'd like to introduce you to Jacqueline Crooks. Hi, Jacqueline. Jacqueline was born in Jamaica and grew up in 70s and 80s Southall, part of London's migrant community, carving out a space through music, where she raved at dub reggae dances. Carving out a space through music where she raved at dub reggae dances. She's carved out a career for herself in the community sector, working with Black and minoritised charities. Her stories have been longlisted for the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction, the Wasafiri New Writing Prize, and the BBC National Short Story Award. Named as a 2023 top 10 debut author by The Guardian and The Observer, her book Fire Rush is set in 1970s and 80s London, Bristol, and Jamaica, and is about the role of women in the underground world of reggae.
Welcome, Jacqueline. Next, I'd like to introduce Uju. Uju Asika is a multi-award-winning nominated blogger, writer, and speaker and creative consultant. She is the creator of the popular family blog, Babes About Town, and the author of 3 books, including her acclaimed debut, Bringing Up Race, How to Raise a Kind Child in a Prejudiced World. Hailed as timely and important, and one of the best books of September 2020 by the Evening Standard. Uju's picture book, A World for Me and You, Where Everyone is Welcome, was published in 2022, and her latest book, Raising Boys to Do Better, A Hopeful Guide for a New Generation, came out in June last year. A former journalist, Uju has been a screenwriter and script editor for some of Nigerian's spiciest TV dramas, including the long-running soap Tinsel. Born in Nigeria, Uju grew up in the UK and has lived in London, New York, and Lagos. She's based in North London with her husband and 2 teenage sons. In her downtime, she enjoys binging Netflix, piling up more books than she can read, and dancing in her kitchen. Welcome, Uju.
Hi, Uju. And finally, I'd like you to introduce Beth Miller. Hi, Beth. Beth has published 8 books, 6 novels, and 2 non-fiction books with 4 different publishers. She's currently writing her 7th novel. Beth has taught creative writing for many years, including for Arvin, and is now course tutor on the MA at West Dean College. She is also a Royal Literary Fund Fellow at Brighton University. She works as a book coach, specialising in helping writers at the submission stage. Her website is bethmiller.co.uk. You know what I mean. Hi, Beth.
Okay, so before we get cracking with some questions, we'd like to get a flavour of our guests' work. So they're each going to give us a short reading from their books and also introduce the book that they're going to read. So Jacqueline, could we start with you, please?
She tells me that women gathered peacock flowers so the seeds of their bodies, their babies, wouldn't be born to be thrown across the Black Atlantic to go down in history as slaves. Women with black rice teeth singing in the rainforests, their voices traveling backwards in their throats so no one would understand their words, boiling the magic seeds of the peacock flower, drinking it as they pressed down on their bellies, pulling out the fruits from their wombs. I wonder how Mama felt when I was in her belly. Maybe she thought about drinking herbs to flush me out into another world, like the women in my visions who jump off slave ships into the sea. We stop again at a litter of stillborn rocks that Granny Itiba says are 5 million years old. We drink soursop juice and eat cashew nuts wrapped in lace bark cloth. Our women were focused on their mission, she says, concentrated as 3-pointed gods. They set fire to the Black Atlantic with seeds and song. That was their rebellion. Better to sing ourselves burning into the understory of the rainforest than go across the Black Sea.
Wonderful, thank you. Uju, could we hear your reading, please?
Hi, everyone. So this is from my book, Raising Boys Who Do Better. It's from a chapter called Mothers and Sons. Before I announced the sex of my first child, strangers predicted it for me. I was living in Lagos at the time, and despite being in a happy relationship, I had no immediate plans of having babies. One afternoon in June, a bout of suspected food poisoning sounded alarm bells. I bought a pregnancy kit from a roadside kiosk, paying 500 naira, about 80p, for the news that would change my life forever. A visit to the doctor revealed I was already 2 months gone. Despite taking so long to realize I was pregnant, I had a strong sense that it was a boy. As the weeks passed, people on the street would meet my growing belly with knowing smiles. Ah, Mama Bon Boy, well done. Well done is a common greeting in Nigeria, but it was also advance praise for my achievement. In West African Pidgin, Bon Boy refers to a plump and healthy baby boy. Calling me Mama Bon Boy was both guesswork and invocation. May I be blessed with a male heir. For a daughter, I might earn her bride price one day, but even in 2005, a son was the ultimate prize. One reason why is that Nigeria is a patriarchal society where a male child is more likely to carry on the family lineage and to support his parents financially in their old age. I can't say how I knew I was having a boy, but I felt his presence strongly. Maybe it was the shape of my bump, a myth, or the heightened sex drive, pure facts. When the ultrasound scan affirmed it, I was giddy with expectation. I wore my bump and the conferred titles with pride. Mama boy, Mama Bon Boy. I wept at the baby shower when my cousin's wife gifted me a hooded towel embroidered with Baby Cole, my married name, in light blue thread. I played Lauryn Hill's Ode to her son Zion on repeat, screeching along to the part where she sings My Joy over and over until her voice cracks. But it wasn't until Ezra was in my arms, squinting up at me, that my heart cracked wide open. Hello, baby boy. My joy, my joy, my joy.
Wonderful. Beth, can we hear from you now, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to read a little bit from, this is my most recent book, The Woman Who Came Back to Life, which came out in 2022. It's about a woman called Pearl who has left the UK and lives in France with her husband Denny in the middle of a wood because stuff went down that she's tried to escape from. This extract comes from when Pearl and Denny realise, a day after they realise that someone, an unknown man, has started living in their private woods that their cottage is in the middle of. Pearl's just coming back from town. I made my way back to the wood and to my astonishment discovered a new padlock on the gate. Of course, Denny had used the trespasser as an excuse to fulfill his dream, lock the world, keep the outside world away even further, lock the wood, keep the outside world even further away. The padlock was heavy duty, not the sort I could pick with a hair clip, not that I had a hair clip on me, or knew how to pick locks. I glanced round to make sure no one was witness to my forthcoming foolishness, then threw my bag over the top of the gate and started to climb. The gate wasn't particularly tall, maybe 2.5 meters, but it was old and rusty, and the higher part didn't have much in the way of footholds. Plus, I was 52. The last time I climbed anything, the Bay City Rollers were in the charts. It was surprisingly all right on the way up, But then I got to the top and stupidly looked down. Wow, it really was a long way off the ground. I was hit with a wave of dizziness. "Help," I said, but quietly because I didn't really want anyone to hear. I tried to assess the likely result if I jumped. Would I be more likely to break my ankle, hip, or kneecap? As I considered the options, my phone rang, a UK number. Not the ideal moment for a chat, but I answered in case it had something to do with Dad's legacy. "Oh, hello, is that Pearl?" It was an English woman's voice. "Yes, what is it?" I slipped slightly and gave a startled scream. "Oh gosh, is this a bad time? Sorry to bother you. How to say it? God, I'm connected to you. God, what I mean is, who is this?" "Sorry, I'm Caroline Haskett. What I'm trying to say is Francis wanted me to contact you." "Francis, my father?" Caroline Haskett, that name rang a bell. I think someone had mentioned it at Dad's funeral. There was a noise below on the wood side, and I leaned forward, clinging grimly with one hand to see what it was. A person was walking towards the gate, towards me, the bearded man I'd seen camping in the woods. I'd so hoped to avoid having any witnesses. "Damn it," I said. "God, what's wrong?" the woman said. I hung up and shoved the phone in my pocket. The man reached the gate and looked up at me with an amused expression. "So we are both thwarted by this new lock." "I just wanted to check out the view from up here," I said airily. "It's very nice." He held out his arms. "I'll catch you." "You will?" He shrugged, looking slightly more laid back than I'd like under the circumstances. "Sure." I supposed I couldn't stay up there forever. Without thinking too much, I jumped off the gate into his arms. He was strong and hairy and smelled of wood smoke, as well as another scent, more chemical that I couldn't immediately identify. He sent me gently onto the ground. "Thank you," I said. "No problem. Do you know when it will be unlocked?" "I'm sorry, my husband put it on to keep you out. I'll get the key, then you can go." He nodded and walked off the path into the trees. In moments, he had disappeared. I was halfway back to the cottage when my phone rang again, the same number as before.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. It was absolutely wonderful to hear your writing in your own voices as well. So we're going to get on to kind of some questions shortly, but before we do, just to kind of get us all warmed up, we've just got one quick fire question for everybody, which is, who is your writing hero and why? So Uju, if we could start with you.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I have many writing heroes, but I think I always turn to Maya Angelou. And I think just because I love the variety. She wrote poetry, she wrote memoir, she wrote some fiction, she did drama. She was just like a Renaissance woman of her time. And also, I love her spirit. She had, when I think of her, I just think of empathy and I think of grace. And that's something that she carried throughout her career. Whatever she was doing, whatever she had experienced, I imagine what it must have been like to be an African American woman, going through so many different decades of what America did to women and specifically to Black women. So yeah, she means a lot to me. I always refer to her as like my spiritual godmother or my fairy godwriter. I don't know. Anyway, Maya Angelou.
I love the idea of having a fairy godwriter. That's fantastic. Jacqueline, who would be your writing hero?
I think definitely Zora Neale Hurston. I absolutely love her work. I find her writing exciting and unusual. I love the fact that she was an anthropologist as well, and that her writing spans the spiritual world as well as the temporal world. That she was intrepid. She was out there in the Caribbean exploring Caribbean obeah and voodoo and bringing that into her stories. yeah, I think that she was really out there ahead of her time. So yeah, that's why I would choose her.
Brilliant. Thank you. And finally, Beth, who is your writing hero?
I think it's Nora Ephron, because I think there's several reasons, but one is my sort of desert island book really is Heartburn, which is a very thinly disguised account of the breakdown of her marriage and her divorce. And it's just, I think it's the book I keep trying to write because it's quite short, it's very funny, it's got recipes in it, but it kind of transcends its sort of, you know, base material, which is, you know, husband was treated her very badly, and turns it into art really. And I just think it's, you know, it's really admirable. I had a copy. Every time I have a copy of it, I lend it to someone and I never get it back. So I'm on about my 7th copy, but one copy that I had a cover quote from somebody that said, "Proof that writing well is the best revenge." So I think that's a really admirable reason to write well, to get revenge. But also she was a jobbing writer and a journalist and a screenwriter at a time when women weren't taken very seriously in those endeavours. And she's written very eloquently about the bizarre sexism of the sort of 1970s newsrooms that she was in. And, you know, she worked on quite a lot of American newspapers, and just how she rose above it with sort of, not exactly grace and dignity, but with like sort of bawdy good humour. I think she was ahead of her time, really.
Brilliant. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, all three of you. Before we get started as well, I just want to say for all of everybody who's listening and watching, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll pick them up and kind of ask them as we go along. So yes, please do ask questions.
Thanks, Anna. So yeah, I suppose just to kind of open up the discussion a little bit, we talked to obviously lots of different women writers throughout our work with writing around the kids, with the panels and the podcast and so on. And so we know that there's really no one size fits all approach to getting anything written. And obviously we're all writing in different mediums and stuff as well. But have you got something that you always need to do before you start work? Jacqueline, can I start with you, please?
Before I start writing, I try not to be too awake. You know, first thing in the morning before I'm fully awake, before doing anything, I just get to my desk and start writing. Because if the day starts to creep in, that can slow down the process, get the critical voice going. But if I'm just not fully awake and haven't done anything else, and it's just all about the writing, and just that's what I've got to do.
That sounds like magic. Uju, how about you?
Yeah, I love that, Jacqueline. I love the whole idea of sort of writing in your like half dream state, because there's so much, I think, just wildness. I was when I wrote my last book, I was explaining to my editor, you know, when she was waiting for me, you know, I was like, I'm coming. And then when I finally got going, you know, I said to her, I just like write it wild. And she was like, oh, I love that expression. And I don't think I came up with it. I think it's from Natalie Goldberg and her book Wild Mind. But I just love that sense of just sitting with the page and just writing and seeing what happens. For me, I don't know, like cup of tea, it just varies. It depends, you know, if I'm feeling in a sort of ritually romantic writing mood, I'll like light a candle and, you know, set up a little space. Otherwise, I just get to it. I think that when you're used to writing around your kids, and, you know, I've written with toddlers on my lap, I've written, you know, on the tube, on the bus, you know, wherever. So I don't think I have specific rituals to really get me into it. So it just depends on my mood. But yeah, probably a cup of tea.
I think also it probably depends what stage of writing you're at as well, because I guess maybe, Jacqueline, for you, if you're more in editing and so on, it might not be the best thing to do when you're half asleep still. But, yeah. Beth, how about you? Have you got a ritual?
I haven't got any rituals really. Like you do, I'm not. I can write anywhere, and sort of I don't need anything apart from saying I need a cup of tea. I'm the opposite to Jacqueline. I have to do a large amount of faffing around before I get to the writing. I'm really envious that because what Jacqueline's talking about, that kind of slightly dreamlike state, that's a lovely place to do writing. But I just don't seem to be able to do that. I just have to. I acknowledge now my process is I faff around on the internet for a while first, and that I just have to do that before I can settle down to it. I don't know why, and I would change it if I could, but I've sort of given up on trying to change stuff like that now. I'm just like, yep, I'm gonna have my faffing time, and then I will write. It's interesting because writing around the kids, it's just such a brilliant organisation. And my kids are 18 and 20 now, and it wasn't there when my kids were really little. And I really needed it. But I'm still slightly, I think I always used to want to start writing at exactly the wrong time when they were young. You know, I always suddenly got into my groove at about 3 o'clock, just before I had to do the school run. And now they're older and I can indulge that. So it's probably really bad for me because I had to learn to get started earlier when they were little, and now I've fallen back into bad habits, and it's like, oh, it's 4 o'clock, I better get cracking now. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but anyway, yeah, faffing is my key thing.
I think that's because that's your kind of time, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah,
You
that's what I'm nodding. Yeah, mine's very much.
Everyone comes home from school.
Which, you know, they are getting older now, so I don't have to go and pick them up. They can just walk home. So yeah.
But yeah, I'm very much more of your way of writing, Jacqueline. I'll set my alarm for an hour before the children wake up, and I think it's just such a golden hour. And yeah, I don't bother getting out of my pajamas, just make a cup of tea, sit down before the world starts getting into my head. But I do find that they can sniff that out really, and so about 5 minutes later, everybody else is up. But the dream is that point before the world around you wakes up. Yeah. So I'm just thinking, so our theme around the International Women's Day is around inspiring inclusion. So I guess, like, what kind of challenges do you think there are for women writers in the current day at the moment? I know this is a big question and there's many answers, but yeah, some challenges that you might have experienced in your own writing life, for example. So maybe if I start saying, you know, with that, we've just been talking about with having children, the writing, finding time to write when there are all of the different plates to spin and different demands on your time. That's tricky, and being able to kind of protect that time and have it as your own is just an ongoing challenge. And also, yeah, to not enable the procrastination to kind of take those sacred bits of time away. But yes, what kind of challenges have you come across?
Well, I'll just follow on from that, Anna, because I something that I find a lot with women writers that I work with is that that feeling of writing is kind of it's not a priority. It's not something that should get in the way of all the other things that all the other demands women have on their time, which might be caring for children or other family members, or, you know, domestic duties or paid work. Women often, it seems to take women writers a bit longer, I think, than it should do to say, oh, I am a writer and writing's important and I kind of need to prioritize it. And that's something I still see a real lot, that people that I work with say the people in their lives don't really take their writing seriously and think they can be interrupted all the time, and carving out that space, even not even just with kids, but just with you know, it looking like a sort of a playful hobby. I think maybe all writers struggle with this, but I do think that women in particular seem to really struggle with allowing the writing to be as important as they know it is, really.
I was going to say, as well as the kind of as the kind of extra duties, things that responsibilities that women have, carrying responsibilities, it's also about the cost. You know, I do believe that writing there is a financial cost, and not everyone can afford it, whether it's doing courses, workshops, traveling to workshops, having someone to pay for childminder to look after the children while you go to these workshops, because writing, there is a craft to this, and you do have to learn this craft as much as it's about just getting down and sitting down and writing. And that is costly. I know that personally I've spent a lot of money doing an MA, doing workshops, and not everyone can afford that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And yeah, completely what Beth was saying about trying to carve out that time and prioritize your writing as a woman is it is like a whole process that you have to go through. You know, I've been writing for however many years, and I still sort of feel those like guilty prickles if I'm just taking time for, and especially if it's like a side project. So it's not like something that I've been commissioned for and I've got the official job, the writer job. It's like, this is going to be published and I know what I'm doing. If it's just that creative, following the breadcrumbs kind of writing, it can be hard to make that feel worthwhile, like, something that I can do for me. And I think also, I'm just thinking back to the pandemic. I remember seeing, I think it was a tweet or something, was someone said, oh, if any woman who has been able to create anything while their child has like asked for snacks like 10 billion times. And I was like, oh my God, like honestly, I was writing my book during the pandemic. My first book, I submitted it just before the week before we went into lockdown. And then I was like doing the editing process and we're homeschooling and all of that. And when I look back on it, I think, wow, I've got to pat myself on the back for achieving that and getting a book out. And then I think that's just what women do every day. We just do it. We get on with it and we shoulder so much of that responsibility. So yeah, it's a challenge.
And how do you think, as writers and as women writers, that we can support other women writers to kind of, make those commitments to their own writing, I suppose. Uju.
Yeah, I think first of all, it starts with yourself, you deciding that, okay, this is important, this is serious, this is worth something. And once you've kind of owned that narrative for yourself, it's much easier to share it. There's a writer that I follow on social media. She's called, I think, Amy McNee. I know her as Inspired to Write because that's her Instagram. And she's like really exploded, but basically she's just been giving such motivational, she's like a motivational speaker for writers. And it's been incredible, watching her, but it's really following her, like owning her voice and deciding that this matters and that art on its own is valuable, it's important, and this is your art and you need to commit to it and the world needs it. And being able to sort of use that to empower other women's voices, I think is everything.
And Jacqueline, have you got anything to add on that point?
I think that, I definitely wouldn't be here other than lots of other women supporting me along the way. So it's my duty to support others. So I tend to try and find at least 2 writers that I mentor informally, because we all need encouragement. We all need one writer who gets what we're trying to do. And it's not necessarily a best-selling author, it's just someone who really understands your vision and is going to support you. So I think every writer needs that, and that's what I try to do. If I see someone I can connect with, another writer at whatever stage, absolute beginner, whatever, then I think it's our duty to reach out and support them.
Yeah, and I know Anna and I experience this when we have our groups on Saturday mornings, that people can even turn up in their pajamas still. The kids are running around because we're doing it on Zoom. But in that hour and a half that we're together, magic happens. They've got that is then their space, and they write some brilliant stuff. And it's just like, I just wish we could kind of bottle it and have it be able to do that, for hours every day or whatever it takes. But yeah, there are some limits.
And I think also sometimes it's like that kind of collective of working together as well, isn't it? Of like hearing your words aloud it's really empowering as well, and having that kind of that critical friend as well, or critical person who can give you feedback and not just say that was brilliant, regardless. You know, we all need to be held up and celebrate our successes, but also being able to be part of writing groups and things like that, where you can, you know, you can kind of feel something bigger than your own writing as well. Because it's quite a lonely thing to do as well, isn't it? At the end of the day, sitting on your own with your own thoughts, creating all these characters or writing about your experiences. So then just to feel part of a wider community often feels almost essential. Would you
Oh, yeah.
agree? Yeah.
I was going to big up writing groups. I was very conscious of what Jacqueline said about the cost of writing, and I think it's true.
Yeah.
It's one of those endeavours you can throw a load of money at, and the brilliant thing about writing groups is they're free, basically. It's I mean, one of the side effects of going on courses is that you might find your little writing group there, but there are other places to meet writers. And I think writing groups do loads of things. I mean, I'm in a couple of writing groups, but one of my writing groups I've been in for about 15 years, and there's just 4 of us, and we just you know, I couldn't have done anything that I've done without them. Just, you know, that it's just an incredible support. There's something about being in a writing group really legitimizes the endeavor. So going back to what we were saying about women finding it hard to kind of really prioritize, I'd say to any writers starting out who are in the session today, find your writing group, find your tribe. It might only be one person or 2 or 3 people, but people who just want to support you in your writing, and they want you to support them in turn. I think it really makes a big difference to the writing, to how you feel about the writing, and just, yeah, and also on a practical level, it can answer questions about, you know, I don't know where to put this semicolon or something, or I can't get my character out of the room. It can be very practical, but that's almost the least of it. More of it is about, yeah, this is a thing that I'm doing, and these people are supporting me to do it. So yeah, I love a good writing group. A bad writing group's really bad though. So try not to get into a bad writing group where you've got lots of egos. And I've been in some bad writing groups as well, but that's for another time.
Beth and I are actually in a writing group together, so
That's
I was
a
just
good one.
wondering which camp that one was in. I'm just seeing we've got a few questions that have started to come in. So let me find the question. So we've got a question here from Tracy, and this is for everybody to say, do you always know how your book will end when you start writing it? I guess this is the kind of the classic planner pantser question, isn't it? So yes, does anybody want to jump in with that about their book?
Sorry, go on, Uju. Go on, Uju, you go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, am I good? Okay. Yeah, so I'll jump in very quickly. I think because like my books have been non-fiction, and they're sort of both like narrative, but also quite practical. And so because I've had to, before even acquiring a publisher, I've had to like write a full proposal with like chapter outlines and the whole thing. So so I do have a sense of how my books will end. And specifically with my last book, with Raising Boys Who Do Better, I knew that with everything I was writing about like, you know, how to talk to your kids about sex and education and toxic masculinity and all of this, I knew that I was going to end it with love letters, because I think that's at the heart of the book. The book is really a love letter to our sons. So yeah, I knew.
I was going to say I do know pretty much the plot straight off, the beginning, the middle, and ending. I just don't know how I'm going to get there and structure it in the language or anything. I just let that come quite naturally. I don't plan anything. I just sit down and write and see what comes out. But yeah, I pretty much know what's going to pan out.
And this is such a good example of how there isn't any right answers in writing. You know, as long as you get the writing done, there's no right answers, because I never know how my books will end. It's always quite a surprise. I am a pantser. I've tried not to be, but I basically write for maybe the first third of a novel, and then I do some planning then, because I about 30,000 words, you hit a bit of a wall if you're a pantser. Which, if you don't know what pantsing is, it's writing by the seat of your pants, which means you don't have a plan. So yeah, no, I never know how they're going to end, and I don't know if that's a good way of doing it or not. But again, it's quite hard to go against the grain of the type of writer that you are. I did for my second novel, because I pantsed my first novel and it took so long to write. I thought planning is the key, and I did plan my second one, which was the only one I've ever planned. But I did find it a slightly joyless experience, so I've gone back to pantsing now.
Is that, Beth, because you like finding out about your characters, like, you know, as you're writing it? So there's the element of as much surprise to you as it would be when it's published and a reader reads it. Do you like that kind of exploration side of it?
Yeah, I think so. Because things happen on the page. When something happens on the page and it's a bit of a surprise, there's no feeling like it, really. I mean, in that extract that I wrote, I've been writing that book for a while, and it was kind of wasn't really working. I don't know, it's a bit dead on the page somehow. And then one day I was writing, and I had Pearl walking through the woods, and then she saw this man, and so I just started writing the man. I didn't know who he was or why he was in my story, but I just suddenly everything came to life, and he turned out to be a really important character. But I don't think I could have planned that. I'm not very good at planning, actually, in general, but especially not with stories. So yeah, I think there's something about that, sort of working out who these people are as I go.
And so I just got a kind of quick follow-on question for you, Jacqueline, around you're saying, so with the start, middle and an end, but like music is so in Fire Rush, it's just it feels so hugely threaded through all of it. I mean, how important was, while writing your story, how important was kind of listening to music while writing? Did you? Yes, I just wondered what the process was.
I mean, I definitely was listening to a lot of dub reggae as I was writing Fire Rush, because it's all about dub reggae. But also anything I'm writing, I hear sound before I hear the word. So sound with a melody, whatever, comes to me before the actual word. And as I'm writing, I've always got a melody going on in my head. It's like I'm bouncing the words against the melody. So I don't think I could write without music. Even if I'm editing and there's no music on, there is something I'm tapping, I'm like listening to something. So yeah, I think for me, I think, as I said this the other day, words and music are cousins. I find it very hard to separate them.
I like that, words and music being cousins.
And I really like the idea of the sound is really what gets you going. We had a writer on a panel that uses smells to start her process. So it's, yeah, the wonderful world of writers. We had a question from one of our audience as well that we kind of touched on before, but how important you think it is to actually study creative writing in some way in order to write. Uju, can we start with you on that one?
Yeah, I think it is important, but I don't think it has to be like a formal study of creative writing. I don't think you have to go and get a degree, or you have to, do a specific workshop. I think the study just can't, it's a whatever stereotype, whatever, to say that you need to read before you can write. But I think that study comes through reading other writers, through reading a variety of writers, through reading across genre and across like different types of disciplines. You can really open up your writing if, for instance, you've only written nonfiction and you decide to read poetry. Sometimes when I'm writing my books and I feel like it's getting a bit stodgy, I go and read some poems, and that just like opens it up for me. Like, because I remember, like, like Jacqueline, like the music of the words is really important to me, like the melody, the lyricism. So I think that study can be very much self-study. And that's the most important kind of study. And that, I think, is just lifelong. I'm still learning from different types of writing that I read.
So Beth, without doing you out of your work as a creative writing tutor, what do you think on that bit?
Yeah, I know you'd expect me to say that it's very important, but actually I don't think courses suit everybody at all. I think there are really useful things that some people can get out of creative writing courses, but I agree with Uju. I think reading is you need to turn to first, and just read. I can't improve on what she said about reading widely and outside your genre, and just soaking up words. I mean, I think courses, a lot of people who come on courses that I've been involved in, it is about learning craft, and I do think there was a debate a few years ago, can you teach writing? And there's definitely lots of aspects of craft that you can teach, I think. There might be some things you can't, but definitely. But something that I think a lot of people get out of courses is two things. One is about getting better at the discipline of just writing and just stacking up the pages, because that's how you learn to be a better writer, really, is just by writing more. And also you might find your people that we were talking about earlier. A course is quite a nice place to meet people. You get to know how people give and receive feedback and which ones you kind of have a rapport with. So courses have more uses, I think, than just learning about craft. But gosh, yeah, no, it's not for everybody. I wouldn't say it's you've all got to do on or anything at all. I mean, loads and loads of people have published brilliant books without ever having got a sniff of a creative writing MA. So yeah.
So I'm just looking, we've got some more questions coming in as well. So there's a question around, how do you build self-belief in your work? I mean, I guess that's, as writers, when did you feel the point where I think this is a story that needs to be out there in the world. I'm not writing for myself. I think I'm writing something that's a book that could be published. Was there a moment where you could feel that in your writing? Or what was your kind of process between kind of starting an idea and then realizing it was something that might have a broader audience? I mean, Jacqueline, how about you with Fire Rush? When did you know that it was the book that you wanted to have published?
I think, the story takes hold of you rather than you deciding you're going to write a story and what it's going to be. That's self-belief. In some ways, I think it's not about self-belief. The story's like, come on, you've got to write this, and you are driven to write it. And I think when you feel a powerful story take you over like that, it becomes a compulsion, and self-belief, I think, doesn't even come into it because you will have moments when you believe in it and when you don't believe in it, and that's part of the journey, and it's learning to ride those out. Some weeks I'm writing, I'm thinking, this is great, I'm loving this. Other weeks, what am I doing? This is terrible. And you've got to recognize that you will have those peaks and troughs. And so it's less about self-belief, and it's like, this story's just simply got to be told.
Did you feel the same, Uju, with did you know that when you had the context of what it is that you wanted to say, that you wanted it to be out there in the world? I mean, or is it, what was your process from kind of idea to then it then having a home in a bookshop?
Yeah, my process was very long and tortured, and like, do I want to write about this topic, and what the hell, why have I decided? But I think, like Jacqueline said, when you've got something that you need to write, it just does eventually kind of take over you. So I really, I didn't want to write like about race of my first book. I was like, this is too big. I'm not going there. I don't want to do it. With the last book, I'm like, do I want to write about masculinity? I don't want to have all the bros coming at me, all of this stuff. But I think that there is the self-belief comes from, as you said, it's a journey. So it comes from, years of really writing and keeping at it. So I would say the self-belief is really tied to tenacity, which is like, I'm persistent regardless of how crappy I feel my writing is today or tomorrow, or like whatever rejection I've had from someone who I think, you don't know me, I'm an amazing writer. How dare you reject my work? So that kind of thing. It's just like, keeping at it. And I think that's where the self-belief really sits for me. But there are moments, I think, that sometimes you're writing and you feel, you feel it in your body when you're writing something really good. And I love that. You can't define it, can't kind of just make it up, but you can feel it as it's happening. So that's that's exciting.
It's tough though, isn't it, as well, as you say, if you know that it's something that's good and that your writing's good and you're getting rejections and things like that, it's really difficult to kind of create that kind of Teflon coat of saying I'm gonna continue and keep going, because rejections are a horrible thing to have to go through in any situation, but especially when it's something so personal as your own words as well. Yeah, how do you feel about that, Beth?
Yeah, I mean, I took so many years to get that first book done, and it wasn't really self-belief that kind of kept me going, really. I did always really still like something about the story, even though I obviously was sick of it after the first 5 years. I'd say after the first 5 years, it doesn't get any more boring. But it did take me about 10 years to finish it, and on and off, and it was partly I knew there was something there, but I didn't really, I didn't know if anyone else would ever think that. And so, I mean, it was, when people liked it, that was a major boost. But I think this is also a women thing. I mean, it might be a writer thing, but I think it is a women thing, that if you ask a woman writer what she thinks about her own writing, she's likely to tell you what's wrong with it first. And you're going to have to coax out of her what's good about it. And it's taken me a while to get that into my own head, to the point where I can honestly say now, I think I really like my own writing. I do like it. It's not always good, obviously, but I do like it. And when I'm working with writers now, I really encourage them to say not just what isn't working and what they don't like, but what is working. Because if you don't know what's working, you don't know what bits you should be keeping in there and what your strengths are. So I think it takes a while. And I think self-belief is about sort of acknowledging that kind of, that if we're going to write, then there's got to be something that we like about it. It's a voluntary endeavor. We could take up sewing if we don't like it. So let's have something that we like about it and acknowledge the things that we do well. Because then also, if you know what you do well and you're honest about it, then you also know what you're not doing so well and what you need to work on. So I don't know, I think that's kind of where I'm coming at it from.
Can I just
no, sorry, Jacqueline, you go.
So just want to say that I think it's really important to say that as a writer, I think you should actually use rejection to power your way forward. It took me 16 years to write Fire Rush, and at the start of that, I had an agent who dropped me. She didn't like what I was doing. I kept on doing the way I wanted it, not the way the agent wanted. And so when she dropped me, I felt kind of empowered because I was then free to write the way I wanted to write, and it paid off because eventually I got there, got published. So I think use rejection in whatever, whether it's your agent dropping you, or I was sending out Fire Rush to so many publishers and agents in the first 5 or 6 years. No one was interested. And then suddenly 15 years later, everyone's interested. So believe in yourself and take rejection and use it as fuel. It's like, I'm going to do this anyway.
And I just want to echo Beth's point about women, the imposter syndrome that is just so familiar to women, and this idea of us, like the self-critique, that little voice which we've been raised with, we've been conditioned with. And part of my book is raising boys, and my first chapter is titled House of Boys. I live in a house of boys, and I cannot tell you how every day each of them, my husband included, will tell me just how brilliant they are at something. Like, I'm a genius at this or at that, or look at what I've done. Have you ever seen anyone do anything as good as that? And I'm like, so I'm trying to learn to channel that a little bit, not to that extent. I don't want to become insufferable to everyone I know, but I am trying to channel that energy a little bit. Be like, yeah, I'm pretty good too. I'm all right. I've published a couple of books. Look at me. So yeah, it's something that I think, all women should really work on, work at.
It's interesting you say that, because we only have one rule in writing around the kids' workshops, and that's that there's no apologies. So no one's allowed to apologise for turning up late because, you know, they've had different commitments, not being able to go to that workshop, and primarily no one's ever allowed to apologise for their work because they're there and they've shown up and they're writing, and all the writing's fabulous anyway, but it's the, yes, let's less apologies for ourselves, more holding ourselves up. Absolutely.
I love that.
I think just gonna U-turn slightly from the emotional side to a bit more into the theoretical. This is a question from Kaz, who's one of our group, that she wants to know whether you think about the beats and the story arcs and the structure that you should follow while you're writing, or is that something that you can just write and it sort of comes naturally? Jacqueline, can I start with you again? Sorry.
I think I'm a bit like Beth. I don't. I just flash write and just get everything down. I'm not thinking about the structure or the arcs or anything. So I think a lot of that happens intuitively. I believe a lot of it's already there in our subconscious minds, and I believe writing is a bit like channeling. That if we just let go, a lot of it will come out, and it will all interconnect. So I like this organic way of working. I'm definitely not a planner, and I think those arcs and those structures and things, they can be, whatever doesn't come out in the first draft or two, you can then go back, and I go back quite mechanically and do it later on.
I think it's conversely one of the things you can get if you are, you know, studying a lot of creative writing techniques, that then you kind of get the ideas of like the beats that you should be hitting can kind of stifle the creative side of things. So yeah, I like the, you know, to write it free, like you say, Uju, as well. Beth, what do you think?
Yeah, same as Jacqueline. I mean, I think those things can be quite useful when you've done first draft. I need to look at them after first draft because I always do something wrong with my structure that I then need to, I generally often don't have anything happening in the last third. That's my big problem. And I'm like, then I have to think about, oh yes, I really need some action in this last third. But I think if you're trying to think about structure and story beats and all those sorts of things while you're writing down the story in first draft, it's just one too many things to hold in your head. And also, you don't know what you need the story to do or what the story is until you finish first draft. So I'm always trying to get people to quickly write, well, as quickly as possible. Don't do what I did for my first one, basically. Just try and get first draft done as soon as possible. And then I think you can see more clearly what the story needs and what it needs to be. But those things are useful. It's useful to have a bit of theory up your sleeve. But, you know, I sometimes look at, you know, old books like Jane Austen's books and think, oh, I wonder, did she ever read Save the Cat? Because she's really following an amazing structure. And then I think, no, you know, people can do this. Like Jacqueline says, you can do this instinctively. You know, it's storytelling. It's a lot of it's instinctive, but those things are useful to look at if something's not working. What's not working, then I look at structure, but I don't do it the other way around.
I've just seen the time. I can't believe it. We're so close to the end of our hour. This absolutely whizzed by. So I've got one kind of final question for everybody, which is you know, a lot of the writers that we work with might be very much at the start of their writing careers. So if you had a piece of advice for somebody who was starting out, or possibly the advice that you would give to yourself at the beginning of your kind of writing journey, what would that piece of advice be? And Uju, if I can start with you.
Yeah, I would just keep it really simple. Keep writing, you know, keep at it. Don't worry about whether you're writing something sort of big and, you know, important, or whether you're writing something small and meaningless. Like, it's all part of you. I say that everything that you write becomes part of your process and becomes part of your practice. And it's that practice that will get you where you want to be and where you want to go in the end. But you've just got to keep at it, you know, write wherever, write on a post-it note, write in your journal, write, you know, I've written all sorts of things in all sorts of places. And a lot of it will never see the light of day, but I'm still here, I'm still writing.
Brilliant, thank you. And Beth, any words of advice from you?
I think my key thing is, you know, you see a lot of stuff about, oh, you've got to write every day and all this sort of thing. And I think I'm sure those are people who have people looking after them. I'm not saying genders here at all. But you don't have to write every day at all. But I think you do have to try and write regularly, and whatever that means for you. I don't write every day, and I never have done. But I think what I would have found really useful when I started out, and what I suggest writers that I work with do, is put writing times in your diary, and call them something, you know, that looks official, like writing work, or, you know, project work or something. Even if it's only an hour, then it's there. You've sort of made a commitment to it, and hopefully you'll, you know, be able to find the time to do it if it's actually in your diary. So diarize the writing time in the way that you would diarize anything else that you have to do that's important. Oh, and get a notebook for each new project, a nice notebook.
Absolutely, about the notebook, we are massive fans of stationery, so yes to that. Jacqueline, any advice from you?
I think for me, like in writing Fire Rush, I had to get the voice right. And I think if you find your voice, the story will come. You know, don't think you have to write in this literary voice, or I think, you know, starting out, you think there's a way you should be writing, there's a particular style or voice, but I think you've got to find your true, honest voice and write with that voice. That's the key to it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous advice from everybody there. And yeah, I can't believe 9 o'clock already. Yeah, so just want to say thank you to our wonderful writers for sharing so openly with us about their process and so on. And thanks for the audience for coming as well. If you follow us on social media, there's more events and stuff coming up. We should be going in the chat now. We've got our next one. Yes, in there. So you can sign up on the Eventbrite. We've got one on writing and perseverance, which is going to be on the 9th of May. So we've kind of touched on some of that stuff this evening, but we'll kind of go into that a bit more then. So yeah, sign up. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks to the Arts Council and for New Writing South for supporting us. And that's it. Good night.